The world is far more intricate than commonly believed, and science is only beginning to document these complexities. This is a story about such unexpected discoveries. In Argentina, there is Lake Diamante, whose shores teem with life, while its depths harbor creatures seemingly from another planet. The lake's water is saturated with sulfuric acid, and the arsenic level is 100 times higher than what is acceptable for drinking water. Located at an altitude of almost 4,000 meters above sea level, the lake experiences both freezing temperatures and intense sunlight. Despite these harsh conditions, living organisms thrive there. Scientists from the University of Buenos Aires in 2012 discovered microscopic bacterial colonies in the depths of these hostile waters, covered in a crystalline shell. This shell acts as armor, protecting them from ultraviolet radiation, acid, and heavy metals. Importantly, the bacteria not only survive, but actively reproduce and feed on sulfur compounds, releasing energy in the process. Their study could shed light on how life might have arisen on Venus or in the oceans under the icy crust of a Jupiter moon. Incidentally, when these bacteria were removed from the water and attempted to be adapted to a normal laboratory environment, they immediately began to die. It was too comfortable. They need poison to live. Second fact: octopuses are capable of dreaming. In 2020, a team of Brazilian neurobiologists published video surveillance data of sleeping octopuses. The camera captured a moment when the animal, in absolute stillness, abruptly changed color, as if playing out a scene of hunting, hiding, and attacking. The octopus first paled, as if hiding in the sand, then became covered in spots, as during a hunt, and suddenly fired a tentacle. All this without waking up. The research showed octopuses, like mammals, have sleep phases, including an active one, an analog of the rapid phase in humans, when we dream. But what is strange? The octopus brain is structured radically differently. It is distributed throughout the body, and most of the neurons are not in the head. Nevertheless, the sleep phase corresponding to dreams exists. Scientists suggest that this is either convergent evolution, that is, the independent invention of the same mechanisms in different branches of life, or a sign that dreams are older than we thought. Perhaps they appeared in the common ancestor of humans and octopuses more than 500 million years ago. Dreams, perhaps, are older than the spine. Third established fact: goldfish are capable of perceiving music and distinguishing between Bach and Stravinsky. In 2004, researchers at Tohoku Gakuin University in Japan conducted a study. Fish were placed in an aquarium and excerpts of classical music were played. When Bach was played, food was added to the water. When Stravinsky was played, no food was added. After several days, the fish approached the feeding area only when Bach was played. The sequence was then reversed. Food was given after Stravinsky. Again, over time, the fish learned to associate the music with food, exhibiting agitation and approaching the feeding area. Experiments were repeated with different composers, varying volume levels, and even with other fish species. The results remained consistent. Therefore, fish not only hear but also process sound patterns, memorizing and classifying them. In their natural environment, this ability is necessary for recognizing the sounds of currents, predator calls, or vibrations from other fish. Most importantly, this disproved the common misconception of fish as mute creatures lacking hearing and consciousness. A goldfish's memory is not limited to 3 seconds, as is often jokingly claimed, but extends to weeks, and they have musical preferences. Beneath the Earth's surface, at a depth exceeding 2,000 kilometers, lies the planet's outer core, a vast layer of molten iron and nickel with a radius of approximately 3,500 kilometers. This is a liquid metallic ocean, constantly in motion, forming convection currents. These currents, in turn, generate the Earth's magnetic field. The mechanism is analogous to a school experiment with a coil. Moving metal generates an electromagnetic field. This field protects the Earth from solar radiation and retains the atmosphere. Without it, the planet would have lost its atmosphere, as happened to Mars. However, more surprising is the instability of the core. Satellite data show fluctuations, shifts, and periodic weakening of the magnetic field by tens of percent over a century. There are areas with almost zero field density, such as the South Atlantic anomaly. Scientists hypothesize that the core pulsates, its rotation speed changes, and there are rare instances of pole reversals. On average, a polarity reversal occurs once every 500,000 years. The last reversal happened about 700,000 years ago. We are currently living in an overdue period, and the timing of the next reversal remains unknown. Fifth fact, a teaspoon of neutron star material weighs 4 billion tons. This isn't a metaphor, it's physics. After a supernova explosion, a core remains, compressed by gravity to the extreme. A city-sized sphere with a mass close to that of the Sun. Inside, there are no atoms, no familiar matter. The pressure is so immense that electrons are crushed into protons, and everything consists of neutrons, like in an atomic nucleus, but on a mountainous scale. These objects are called neutron stars. If 1 cubic centimeter of this substance could be transported to Earth, it would pierce the crust, mantle, and reach the core. However, this is impossible. The material exists only under pressures and temperatures unattainable on the surface. Neutron stars are also among the fastest rotating objects. Some make hundreds of revolutions per second. This creates pulsars, sources of radio signals pulsating with perfect frequency. Scientists have even used pulsars as cosmic beacons to create a navigation system analogous to the global positioning system, but for interstellar spacecraft. In a world ruled by monstrous density, time and space behave differently, and this is all indicated by one modest number on the scales, 4 billion tons. Fact 6. The common zebra is incapable of surviving in captivity, despite hundreds of attempts to domesticate it. One might assume that a striped horse would be easily trained for riding or other work. However, this is not the case. Historically, zebras were tried in the army, harnessed to carriages, and trained for carrying loads. Colonial officers in Africa in the 19th century were particularly persistent. Trypanosomiasis was killing horses, and zebras seemed like an ideal replacement. But every attempt ended the same way: rebellion, aggression, bites, and uncontrollable behavior. The problem is not a lack of intelligence. Zebras have excellent memory and coordination. The issue lies in their psyche. Unlike horses, zebras are solitary and territorial animals. They lack hierarchies like an alpha stallion, and they are not inclined to submit. Furthermore, they lack a breaking point, the moment when a wild animal accepts human dominance. All attempts at training only cause stress and aggression. Even when British zoologist Walter Rothschild at the beginning of the 20th century harnessed zebras to a carriage and drove through London, it was a single stunt, not everyday practice. Each zebra is a unique individual with a unique stripe pattern and character. To this day, it remains a wild animal, not due to a lack of time or knowledge, but because its evolution has taken a different path. Fact number 7. Each raindrop contains a bacterium. This is not a hypothesis, it's a microscopic observation. Rain doesn't simply begin. For moisture in the air to coalesce into a drop, a condensation nucleus, a tiny particle, is needed, around which water molecules gather. This is often dust or salt. However, in millions of cases, it's a living organism. Scientists from Louisiana State University and the United States Atmospheric Research Center discovered bacteria of the genus Pseudomonas in rain samples in the early 2000s. These organisms are not merely carried by the wind. They can induce ice formation at temperatures above zero, making them ideal crystallization nuclei. Furthermore, they seem to use clouds as a means of transportation. In some regions, they are active in spring, in others in autumn, as if adapting to conditions. There is a theory that some species evolved specifically for travel on raindrops. Even more has been found in the tropics, entire complexes of microorganisms spread by precipitation. That is, rain is not simply water, but a biological process involving atmospheric bacteria that influence climate, nutrient cycles, and even the distribution of diseases. When you look at a thunderstorm, you can imagine the sky as a giant laboratory where life not only exists, but also manages the weather. Fact number 8. The cells of your body disagree with your age. Literally. A person's age isn't a single number, but a mosaic. Different tissues have different biological dates. The oldest cells are in the eye lens. They don't renew from birth. Skull bones are 10 to 12 years younger than you, and intestinal epithelium is only a few days old. The heart partially renews, about 1% of cells per year. The liver, however, has a renewal cycle of approximately 500 days, and its cells are completely renewed in a couple of years. In 2013, a group of Swedish scientists from the Karolinska Institute used carbon dating to determine when exactly the heart cells of people of different ages were born. It turned out that even an 80-year-old person has cardiomyocytes only a few years old. The brain is a separate story. Neurons almost never renew, but glial cells, auxiliary ones, divide and change. Hence the paradox. I am one, but the body is like a patchwork quilt of different aged components. In this sense, age is not the number in a passport, but the arithmetic mean of trillions of cellular histories. And this opens the way for future diagnostic methods, a biological passport, where it will be possible to see where the body ages faster and where, as if frozen in time. Fact number 9. A snail can hibernate for up to 3 years and then wake up as if nothing happened. This is not an exaggeration. There is an officially recorded case when an Egyptian desert snail, Eremina desertorum, spent 48 months in a state of anabiosis. It was discovered in 1846 on the wall of a herbarium box in the British Museum. It was considered dead, but almost 4 years later, in 1850, it came to life. It started crawling, eating, and leaving a trail. Researchers were amazed. Snails can indeed freeze their activity completely, curling up in their shells and sealing the entrance with a calcareous door. In this state, their metabolism is almost zero. The heart stops, breathing ceases, but the cells remain viable in a pause. This often happens in deserts, where precipitation may not occur for years. Water is the main trigger. As soon as a drop hits the shell, the organism reverses the process. Biologists study snails as a model for cryobiology and medicine. Perhaps their survival mechanisms will help create anabiosis technologies for humans. After all, if a mollusk the size of a fingernail can stop time for years, then we are not so far from it. Fact number 10. Some plants are capable of counting to 5. Botanists from the University of Bonn in Germany made an amazing discovery while studying the behavior of beans and peas. When a stem searches for support, it moves slowly, performing circular movements. This is called nutation. Scientists recorded how the tip of the stem probes the space, as if searching for a post or stick. But the key is that these movements are not chaotic. The plant seems to remember where it has already searched and tries not to repeat itself. In the experiment, from 1 to 5 obstacles were placed in front of the plant, and it began to build a strategy for bypassing them. After several attempts, the sprouts began to avoid previously unsuccessful directions. The moment when the 5th support was placed is particularly interesting. In most cases, the plant stopped reacting, as if it had reached the ceiling of processing. Mathematical analysis showed that the behavior corresponds to models of short-term memory and counting, up to 5 objects. This is amazing. The plant has no brain, no neurons, and the reaction is like that of the simplest animal. Scientists believe that the basis lies in biochemical chains, where each stimulation leaves a temporary trace in the tissues. It's as if plants had short thoughts made of proteins. In other words, the green sprout by the window is not so simple. It remembers, analyzes, and makes choices. Silently, of course. 11th fact, the human eye can detect a candle flame at a distance of up to 30 kilometers under ideal conditions. This is not a myth or poetic exaggeration. Em 2014, grupo de American researchers from the University of Rochester conduciram uma série de testes on visual perception em condições de high darkness and a pure atmosphere. The results were astonishing. Excluding light pollution, haze pollution, and clouds, a person is able to detect the light from one single candle at a distance comparable to the width of the English Channel. It's all about the sensitivity of photoreceptors, especially rods, responsible for night vision. In complete darkness, they can register a single photon, un elementary partículo de luz. Of course, for the signal to reach the brain, several photons must be present simultaneamente, mas o threshold remains surpreendentemente low. In laboratory experiments, people were placed in special dark chambers, and the momento que o pupil dilated to its maximum e o brain began a registrar impulses, was recorded. Although in urban conditions we almost never encounter complete darkness, our visual apparatus retains this ability from ancient times, when survival depended on whether we noticed a faint glimmer of fire on the horizon. It's all about the sensitivity of photoreceptors, especially rods, responsible for night vision. In complete darkness, they can register un single photon, un elementary partículo de luz. Of course, for the signal to reach the brain, several photons must be present simultaneamente, mas o threshold remains surpreendente low. In laboratory experiments, people were placed in special dark chambers, and the momento que o pupil dilated to its maximum, e o brain began a registrar impulses. Although in urban conditions we almost never encounter complete darkness, our visual apparatus retains this ability from ancient times, when survival depended on whether we noticed a faint glimmer of fire on the horizon. It turns out that even in un mundo de floodlights, screens, and light bulbs, our eye is still ready to catch light from the other end of the valley. 12th fact. On the summit of Mount Everest, water boils at 69 degrees Celsius. This sounds like a mistake, but it's pure physics. The air pressure at the foot of the mountain is about 1 atmosphere, while at an altitude of 8,848 meters, it is 3 times lower. Since the boiling point depends on external pressure, the lower the pressure, the easier it is for water molecules to leave the liquid and turn into steam. At the summit, this happens at 69 to 70 degrees. In practice, this creates many difficulties. For example, food is poorly cooked at this altitude. Its cooking requires more time, and boiling water is not hot enough to properly cook rice grains or soften pasta. Climbers use special devices and airtight containers to compensate for this effect. But in the scientific community, the phenomenon has become a starting point for experiments. Boiling in a rarefied environment helps to study the behavior of liquids in space and on other planets. The irony is that at the highest point on Earth, boiling water is the coldest. Fact 13. A whale's heart beats twice a minute. This isn't due to laziness, it's simply a reflection of its life rhythm. The largest animal on Earth, the blue whale, weighs up to 180 tons and can exceed 30 meters in length. Its heart weighs almost half a ton. In 2019, scientists from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, using instruments attached to the whale's skin, recorded its actual heart rate for the first time. They discovered something unexpected. During deep dives, which can exceed 100 meters, the heart rate slows to 2, sometimes even 1 beat per minute. This helps the whale conserve oxygen and redirect blood flow to vital organs. When the whale surfaces and breathes, the heart rate increases to 30 to 40 beats per minute. This pulse pendulum is an adaptation to an extreme lifestyle where each breath is invaluable. Furthermore, due to its enormous size and energy expenditure, the whale's heart operates near its maximum capacity. Scientists believe this is why blue whales cannot be any larger. Their hearts simply wouldn't cope. This is the limit. A heart drum beating twice a minute in the ocean silence, pumping life into tons of being. Fact 14. Lightning can strike upwards. This is not a metaphor, but a documented phenomenon that was long considered a measurement error. In the common understanding, lightning is a spark that travels from a cloud to the ground. However, since the beginning of the 2000 years, satellites monitoring thunderstorms have begun regularly recording bursts of radiation and light going not down, but up towards the stratosphere and beyond. These discharges were named sprites and blue jets. These discharges can reach altitudes of up to 80 kilometers, creating giant light figures resembling jellyfish or ancient trees. One of the most spectacular cases was recorded in 2009 over France. A flash rose to a height of 90 kilometers and lasted about 2 milliseconds. Why does this happen? A thunderstorm is not only contact between a cloud and the Earth, but also a powerful interaction within the atmosphere itself. When a particularly high charge accumulates, it can break upwards into a region where there is almost no air, and then the lightning flips. Some scientists believe that these flashes can affect the chemical composition of the upper layers of the atmosphere, and possibly even radio communications. That is, one flash over a field in Texas is not just a show, but an impulse that can affect atmospheric layers over another continent. Lightning is not always what strikes down from the sky. Sometimes it bursts upwards and further. Fact number 15. Your body currently harbors more bacteria than human cells. The number of bacteria exceeds the number of human cells by a factor of 10. This isn't a disease, but rather the norm. We live in symbiosis with trillions of microorganisms, in the intestines, on the skin, in the respiratory tract, and even in the eyes. In the early 2010s, it was believed that there were up to 10 bacterial cells for every human cell. Current estimates are slightly more modest, approximately 1:1 or 3:1. But the essence remains unchanged. You are not only you. The gut microbiome is particularly interesting. Thousands of bacterial species reside there, not only aiding in digestion, but also participating in hormone production, protecting against infections, and even influencing mood. In 2012, the Human Microbiome Project demonstrated that the composition of the microflora is unique, like a fingerprint. Even identical twins have different microbiomes. Furthermore, disruption of this balance is linked to dozens of diseases, from autoimmune to psychiatric disorders. Scientists are already developing methods of microbiota transplantation, where bacteria from one person are introduced into another, and this is therapeutic. We are accustomed to thinking of bacteria as enemies, but in reality, we are an ecosystem in which microscopic allies play the first violin. Without them, a human is an incomplete biological formula. With bacteria, a complete organism. That is, strictly speaking, each of us is we. Fact number 16. Leaves whisper when earthworms move beneath them. This is not a poetic image, but an acoustical phenomenon recorded using sensitive microphones and laser visualization. In 2023, a group of British researchers from the University of Cambridge noticed strange signals in the forest floor. In the morning hours, especially after rain, the foliage began to crackle quietly. Initially, they thought it was raindrops or thermal expansion, but correlating with infrared cameras revealed that earthworms were active beneath the leaf layer at these moments. Their movement through the moist soil creates miniature vibrations that are transmitted to the leaves through thin stems and petioles. When a worm crawls, it doesn't just move forward, it literally rings throughout the forest floor structure. This sound is too faint for the human ear, but quite detectable by instruments. Why is this important? Such signals can serve as a guide for birds or insects searching for food. It also shows how sensitive the ecosystem is. Even the quietest movement is already a signal. In a world where everything is connected, even the rustle of a worm becomes part of the forest symphony. And this is not a metaphor. It's a recorded reality. Fact number 17. Spiders have musical preferences. Literally. In 2016, scientists at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology conducted experiments with spiders of the genus Latrodectus, known as black widows. They recorded the vibrations that spiders create on their webs and translated them into an audible range, effectively sounding the spider's melodies. Further experiments involved playing different types of vibrations to the spiders, both natural and artificially created musical patterns. The spiders reacted differently. Some compositions caused excitement and attempts to hunt, others caused fear and hiding, and others caused listening. The spider would freeze and slightly vibrate its body as if analyzing the rhythm. They responded most actively to sounds close to the frequencies of courtship. Male spiders play on the web like a musical instrument to attract a partner and avoid being eaten. It turns out that spiders have not just sensory organs, but a whole communication system based on vibrations. The web is a home, a trap, and a musical stage. When the right music plays, the spider reacts as if to a call. Scientists even suggested that musical patterns could be used to control spider behavior, for example, to guide them, avoiding poisonous contacts. Music as a universal language proved understandable to eight-legged creatures. 18th fact: humans emit light. This is a faint, almost imperceptible glow to the naked eye, but its existence has been scientifically confirmed. In 2009, researchers from the Tohoku Institute in Japan used highly sensitive cameras to record the natural bioluminescent radiation of the human body. The cameras recorded photons in the visible range, showing that each person emits a very dim light, approximately 1,000 times fainter than the threshold of human vision. This phenomenon is not related to heat or infrared radiation. It is visible light resulting from chemical reactions within cells. The interaction of oxygen molecules with metabolic products leads to short bursts of light, so-called autofluorescence. Interestingly, the intensity of this glow varies throughout the day. It peaks around 4 o'clock in the afternoon and is at its minimum after midnight. The face glows brighter than the abdomen, and the chest is dimmer than the forehead. Individual differences in the glow are also observed. This discovery may have practical applications. Analysis of glow patterns could allow for the diagnosis of metabolic disorders, inflammation, and even stress levels. While this glow is currently invisible to the naked eye, cameras can detect it. A human being is a luminous creature. In this sense, the phrase illuminated takes on an almost literal meaning. 19th fact: a quantum liquid can flow upwards. This phenomenon, known as superfluidity, was first recorded in 1938 in liquid helium. When helium-4 is cooled to a temperature below 2.1 of a degree Kelvin, which is near absolute zero, it loses its viscosity completely. It becomes superfluid, able to flow through walls, climb tubes against gravity, and seep through micropores that ordinary liquids cannot penetrate. Scientists at the low-temperature laboratory in Helsinki conducted an experiment. They placed helium in an open container and it simply flowed out, not from the bottom, but up through the walls. The molecules move as a single unit in a perfectly coordinated manner without internal friction. This is quantum behavior on a macroscopic scale. Ordinary liquids are slowed down by molecule-to-molecule collisions. In the superfluid state, there are no collisions, no resistance. Everything flows perfectly. This effect is used in advanced cooling technologies, in modeling processes in the core of neutron stars, and, in theory, could form the basis of future energy transportation systems with minimal losses. A liquid that overcomes friction and gravity sounds like magic, but it's just helium, pushed to the limit of its possibilities. Fact number 20. Chickens possess an intelligence comparable to that of a 3-year-old child. This doesn't extend to arithmetic or reading, of course, but in a number of cognitive tasks, they demonstrate abilities previously thought to be exclusive to mammals. Research conducted by Emory University in the United States has shown that chickens can recognize up to 100 faces of other chickens, distinguish between familiar and unfamiliar individuals, understand cause and effect relationships, and even exhibit empathy. In one experiment, a hen was placed in a cage next to a chick that was subjected to a gentle airflow, inducing mild stress. The hen was unharmed, yet her pulse and stress hormone levels increased synchronously with the chick's discomfort. This is evidence of empathy, a quality long denied in birds. In another test, chickens were trained to find food in closed containers. They quickly learned where the food was and adjusted their behavior when conditions changed, demonstrating cognitive flexibility. Cases of tactical deception have also been recorded. A rooster pretended to have found grain to attract a hen. All this suggests that the chicken brain is not a symbol of stupidity, but an underestimated computational center. And next time you look into a chicken's eye, remember, behind that gaze lies memory, choice, and perhaps a tiny emotion. Fact number 21. The smell of space is described as a mixture of hot meat and melted metal. Space itself doesn't smell like a vacuum, as breathing there is impossible. However, astronaut spacesuits and the exterior of the ISS absorb molecules during spacewalks, which are later released inside. Upon removing their helmets, astronauts experience a specific aroma, described by many. Comparisons include hot iron, dusty barbecue, the smell of welding, and ozone. This isn't fiction, but a consequence of space chemistry. In open space, ultraviolet radiation and solar wind break down molecules into free radicals. These radicals, including aromatic hydrocarbons, settle on the surfaces of suits and modules. Inside, they react with the air, creating the sensation. In 2009, an attempt was made to reproduce this smell in a laboratory. Omega Ingredients, commissioned by NASA, created a mixture closely approximating the smell of space. It was used in simulators to better prepare astronauts for this sensation upon re-entry. Even the silent void, it turns out, has a scent, and that scent is like grilled iron on an invisible cosmic grill. Fact number 22. Veins appear blue not because the blood is blue. Human blood is always red, from bright scarlet in the arteries to dark crimson in the veins. However, veins do appear blue under the skin, especially in light-skinned individuals. This is due to how light scatters in tissues. The skin transmits light waves of different lengths differently. Short waves, blue, penetrate less and reflect faster, while long waves, red, penetrate deeper. When light hits the skin, some of the red light is absorbed or scattered deep within, while blue waves reflect closer to the surface. The eye, analyzing the image, perceives veins as bluish areas. The contrast effect also plays a role. Bluish shadows against the warm skin tone enhance the impression of blue rivers under the epidermis. Scientists from Harvard Medical School conducted modeling. Under otherwise equal conditions, if a vein were placed on the skin surface, it would appear dark red. But, embedded a few millimeters deep, it begins to glow blue. And yes, aristocrats did not have blue blood. It's simply a fortunate combination of thin skin and a sunny day. So, blue veins are an illusion of perception, multiplied by the body's optics. But a beautiful illusion. Fact number 23. In the Sahara Desert, ice forms every night. While daytime temperatures can reach 50 degrees Celsius, the nighttime situation changes dramatically. The desert air is extremely dry, the sand quickly releases heat into space, and the sky is clear, without clouds that could act as insulation. This leads to a sharp drop in temperature after sunset. In some regions, it falls to 0 degrees and below. It is then that thin ice crusts form on surfaces, on rocks, grass, and metal objects. In 2010, a research team from the University of Strasbourg conducted nighttime observations on the Tasselina Gere Plateau and recorded consistent frosts for 7 consecutive nights with daytime temperatures above 45 degrees. This effect is known as radiative cooling. The same principle was used in ancient Persian ice storage systems. Containers of water were placed in the open desert, and overnight they would be covered in ice, despite the hot climate. Water was frozen in this way as far back as the 6th century BC. Therefore, one of the hottest spots on the planet is also one where icy patterns can be found. The key is to wait for night and pay close attention to the rocks. Fact 24. Plants can hear. In 2019, scientists from Tel Aviv University proved that flowers of the cruciferous family, in particular the sweet evening primrose, react to sound vibrations. The experiment was simple. A recording of a bee buzzing was played near the plant, and then the nectar content was measured. Within 3 minutes of playing the buzzing, the plant increased the sugar content of the nectar by 20%. When white noise or other sounds were played, there was no reaction. This meant that the flower not only detects vibrations, but also classifies them. How? It turned out that the petals act as membranes. They capture sound waves and transmit mechanical impulses to the cells. In response to the necessary frequency, the plant changes the nectar composition, attracting pollinators. This is a quick and economical way to increase the chances of reproduction. Scientists suggest that dozens of plant species have such ears, and that hearing is an ancient ability that simply no one looked for. Perhaps in the wild, there is a whole concert, with insects, pollen, wind, and flowers acting as listeners and performers. We just don't hear this botanical music yet. Fact number 25. The moon smells of gunpowder. All astronauts who have been on its surface, independently of each other, described the same smell. When they returned to the module and removed their helmets, a sharp smell of burnt gunpowder or smelted metal was felt in the compartment. This is not a hallucination. Particles of lunar dust adhere to spacesuits and instruments, and when interacting with oxygen in the module, they begin to chemically react. Lunar dust, or regolith, is unusual in composition. It contains a large number of sharp, microscopic particles: glass, silicon, metal fragments, oxides. Due to the absence of an atmosphere on the moon, meteorites do not burn up, but hit the surface, melting it and leaving millions of glass balls and fragments. These particles absorb solar radiation, accumulate charge, and upon contact with oxygen, they chemically flash, releasing a smell. Buzz Aldrin and Gene Cernan said that this aroma is unmistakable. It is not like Earth, not like dust, but like something that is about to explode. Interestingly, despite all attempts to reproduce the smell in terrestrial laboratories, it has never been accurately replicated. The conditions are too specific. It turns out that the moon has its own character, and it is felt not only in the landscape, but also in the nose. Fact number 26. Have you ever heard an unfamiliar melody in a dream? This is possible. Some people actually receive new music in their dreams. In the mid-50s, Paul McCartney woke up with a melody that wouldn't leave him alone. He recorded it on a tape recorder, played it for his friends, and asked, "Whose song is this?" Everyone shrugged. Then he realized the melody came from his dream. Thus, Yesterday was born. Since then, numerous scientific publications have appeared on the phenomenon of dreams with creative elements. In the early 2001s, neuroscientists from the University of Helsinki collected a selection of confirmed cases where artists, composers, and even mathematicians received new ideas directly from their dreams. It is believed that during the REM sleep phase, the brain doesn't just replay experiences, but also combines fragments into unexpected combinations. If a person, especially a creative one, falls asleep to music or worked with it during the day, the brain can cross sounds, reproduce them in a new order, and actually generate novelty. Moreover, with proper training, this can be done intentionally. Musicians participating in an experiment in the 2001s were able to induce sound dreams by listening to certain patterns before sleep. That is, dreams are not only images, but also potential symphonies. You just need to wake up in time and record it. Fact 27th. Butterflies retain memories of their existence as caterpillars. It would seem a complete transformation. The caterpillar spins a cocoon, inside which it breaks down into a cellular soup, and from this nothing, a butterfly emerges. However, in 2008, scientists from the University of Georgia conducted a study that changed this perception. They trained Manduca sexta moth caterpillars to avoid a specific scent by pairing it with a mild electric shock. Soon, the caterpillars began avoiding the scent without the shock. Then they were placed in cocoons. When butterflies emerged from the pupa, they were again presented with the same scent. The butterflies also avoided it. This indicated that memory, or at least a trace of past experience, survived metamorphosis. It became clear, not all cells dissolve. Neurons, perhaps, are partially preserved, and with them, fragments of memories. Some researchers suggest that metamorphosis is not a complete reset, as previously thought, but a complex reorganization process. A butterfly is not a new life, but the next stage of the same memory. This provides a new perspective on evolution. Even the most radical transformation can carry imprints of the past. The image of a caterpillar forgetting itself is beautiful, but nature is more complex. Fact 28. Plant pollen can trigger thunderstorms. This rare but documented phenomenon is called thunderstorm asthma and was first seriously studied in Melbourne, Australia in 2016. During a severe thunderstorm, more than 8,000 people went to hospitals with acute asthma attacks, half of them without a prior diagnosis. 9 people died. Scientists quickly linked the surge to high concentrations of ragweed pollen and thunderstorm downpours. Under a microscope, it turned out when pollen enters a cloud with high humidity, it does not settle, but bursts. Each grain divides into hundreds of microparticles, which become an aerosol and easily penetrate the lungs. In addition, electrical discharges of lightning can change the charge of particles, facilitating their spread. It turns out that a thunderstorm, which is usually considered air purification, in some cases turns into a distributor of allergens. Today, in cities with a high level of ragweed, thunderstorm conditions are being monitored. If factors coincide, warnings are issued. This connection, pollen and lightning, seemed absurd before. Now it is included in medical protocols, and next time when the smell of a thunderstorm seems fresh, it is worth remembering, for someone, it can become a trap. Fact number 29. Sharks glow in the dark, and they do it with mathematical precision. While shark bioluminescence has been known for some time, detailed study is relatively recent. Only in 2020, scientists from the National Oceanography Center in Southampton, using spectral cameras in the deep Indian Ocean, capture something unusual: luminous patterns on the bodies of sharks of the genus Atmopteris. These patterns are not simply random spots, but symmetrical figures arranged in a specific order. These deep-sea sharks inhabit depths of up to 1,000 meters in perpetual darkness. Their glow is generated by photophore cells, microscopic organs containing luminescent pigments. The arrangement of these photophores is strictly ordered, along the lateral line, around the gills, and along the edges of the fins. It resembles a complex diagram, and this is no coincidence. The light likely serves as a code for the sharks. For example, luminous stripes on the belly act as camouflage, making the silhouette less visible from below by blending with the ambient light of the water. However, some patterns are unique to different species and probably play a role in communication. This is especially important in an environment where sight is the primary means of communication. Light acts as a language. Furthermore, research has shown that the patterns on the shark's body correspond to fractal structures, mathematical patterns with self-similarity. This means that nature has created a shark that not only glows, but also uses light to create geometric designs. Fact number 30. Our bones are alive and can hear. For a long time, the skeleton was considered a passive structure: support, calcium storage, organ protection. But today, it is known that bone is an organ with nerves, blood vessels, cells, and even sound receptors. In 2017, researchers from the University of Padua discovered that osteocytes, cells living within bone tissue, respond to mechanical waves in the audible sound range. Experiments on mice showed that if a bone is exposed to vibration at a frequency of about 100 Hz, genes responsible for growth and repair are activated. This discovery coincided with medical observations. In patients who underwent low-frequency vibration therapy, bone density increased. In addition, bones participate in hormonal regulation. They produce osteocalcin, a protein that affects blood sugar levels, cognitive functions, and even stress resistance. That is, the skeleton is not a framework, but a full participant in the dialogue within the body. It feels the load, hears sounds, participates in metabolism, and influences the brain. One experiment showed that if a person is in a state of weightlessness for several weeks, the bones go deaf, lose their ability to perceive vibrations, and this triggers destruction. Therefore, to maintain bone health, not only calcium and exercise are important, but also, in a certain sense, sounds. Fact number 31. Inside a mosquito resides a proboscis, akin to a syringe, capable of discerning blood type by taste. The mosquito's mouthparts are not merely a sting, but a highly sophisticated instrument. It possesses 6 needles, each with a unique function. Some cut the skin, others locate capillaries, a third injects saliva, and a fourth extracts blood. The entire process occurs almost silently. The tip of the proboscis is mobile, equipped with microteeth, vibrating at a frequency of up to 30 Hz, and enters the skin with minimal resistance. However, the most remarkable aspect lies in the chemical composition of its saliva. It contains dozens of substances, anticoagulants, anesthetics, enzymes that dilate blood vessels. The saliva doesn't just lubricate the bite, it makes it possible. When the mosquito finds a capillary, it begins to suck blood, simultaneously tasting it. Receptors in the proboscis react to the levels of glucose, iron, and hormones. If the composition is unsuitable, for example, the blood is too viscous or has a high concentration of certain antibodies, the mosquito may cease feeding. Furthermore, mosquitoes show a preference for individuals with a specific body odor, skin temperature, and even blood type. Individuals with blood type O attract them more frequently. All this makes the common mosquito not just an insect, but a living medical device. Precise, sensitive, and, unfortunately, very persistent. Fact number 32. It rains metal on Venus. The atmosphere of the second planet from the Sun is not just dense, but hellish. The pressure is 92 times higher than Earth's. The temperature exceeds 470 degrees. The air consists of carbon dioxide, and the clouds are made of sulfuric acid. However, the most unusual phenomenon is observed in the upper atmosphere. Pairs of rare earth metals, including bismuth and gallium, have been detected there. Scientists from the Max Planck Institute suggest that at high altitudes, these elements evaporate from the surface, rise as microscopic aerosols, and then, cooling down, condense and fall as a metallic mist or even droplets. This process is not like ordinary rain, but rather like the settling of metal-saturated dust. Indirect confirmation came from the analysis of spectra obtained from the Venus Express and Akatsuki orbital probes. They record characteristic peaks corresponding to compounds of heavy elements. On the surface, the metals may melt and form mirror-like puddles, like lead in a mercury bath. This is why Venus is one of the brightest planets in the sky. The clouds and precipitation reflect a huge amount of light. It turns out that every time you see the evening star, you are looking at a world where it rains metal. A dazzling brilliance and no romance. Fact number 33. Ants possess the ability to construct living bridges. Certain species, notably Eciton burchelli in South America, build these bridges not from branches or earth, but from their own bodies. When a colony encounters a gap in its path, a ravine, a crack, a stem, the ants rapidly begin to interlock, forming a chain. The first ants attach to the edge, the next to them, and so on, until a living structure emerges, allowing others to pass. This is not a random cluster. The ants regulate tension, thickness, and angle. If the flow of ants increases, the bridge widens. If it decreases, some individuals detach and return to the column. The bridge constantly rebuilds itself in real time without central command. Princeton University scientists, modeling this behavior, determined that each ant decides whether to become part of the bridge based on pressure, the number of neighbors, and the frequency of passing ants. These local algorithms, in sum, yield an optimal structure. Engineers are inspired by this strategy for creating robotic swarms and self-organizing systems in architecture. Imagine a system where each participant is simple, yet collectively they are brilliant. The ants do not know they are building a bridge, yet the bridge appears and functions. Fact number 34. Bees can distinguish and remember human faces. In a study conducted at the Australian National University, scientists trained bees to differentiate between human faces in photographs. They were shown two images, one rewarding, for which they received a drop of sugar, and one neutral. After several repetitions, the bees learned to choose the rewarding image. The images were then switched, slightly distorted, and noise was added, yet the bees still correctly identified the correct face. This indicates that their brain, consisting of only 1 million neurons, is capable of analyzing complex visual patterns, identifying features, and forming long-term memory. Considering that the human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, this seems miraculous. However, perhaps the key is not size, but organization. Bees use a modular approach. They have neural modules responsible for orientation, color, and shape processing. A face for them is simply a combination of these features. This behavior helps them in nature to distinguish flowers, navigate, and recognize members of their colony. But most importantly, they remember. When a bee looks at a human face, it doesn't just see eyes and a nose, it recognizes them, and it may return to that familiar face again. Fact 35. Cuckoos don't just lay their eggs in other birds' nests, they expertly forge them to an almost indistinguishable degree. Female cuckoos of the species Cuculus canorus choose the nest of a specific bird species, for example, a reed warbler, and lay an egg that is almost identical in shape and color to the eggs of that bird. Each female specializes in one species and passes this specialization on through inheritance, along the maternal line. Geneticists have established that cuckoos have a specific mitochondrial lineage linked to the forgery of this particular egg type. However, the host birds are not passive. They have learned to distinguish even the slightest differences in coloration and shell patterns. This has led to a true evolutionary arms race. The better the cuckoo egg's camouflage, the more meticulously the reed warbler female checks it. Researchers from Cambridge conducted experiments with egg substitution and found that some birds reject eggs differing by a couple of % in color from the average in the clutch. But the cuckoo has an advantage. Its egg develops faster than that of a typical bird, in just 24 hours. It bursts into the nest, ejects one of the real eggs, and leaves its own, a near-perfect imitation. As a result, the cuckoo chick hatching earlier ejects the others and grows alone, receiving all the food. This biological deception is so sophisticated that in science it is compared to espionage operations in speed, accuracy, and consequences. Fact number 36. Microscopic mites of the genus Demodex live inside your skin. They are permanent inhabitants of human sebaceous glands and hair follicles, primarily located on the face, especially around the nose, forehead, and chin. Almost every adult is a carrier. These mites are invisible to the naked eye. Their length is about 100 microns. They feed on sebum, move at a speed of several millimeters per hour, and are most active at night. For a long time, they were considered harmless, and generally this is true. In most people, they do not cause any symptoms. However, in the 2000s, data began to appear linking an excess of Demodex to rosacea, a chronic inflammation of the skin. A particularly interesting discovery was that these creatures have practically no immune system of their own and depend on the condition of the host's skin. Moreover, they lack an anal opening. They accumulate waste products in their bodies and, upon dying, literally burst inside the follicle. Normally, the body copes with this, but if the balance is disrupted, inflammation may begin. The irony is that these worms are always with us from birth and will likely be with us until the end. We don't feel them, we don't see them, but they participate in the regulation of skin microflora as part of a personal ecosystem. Even when you look in the mirror, your face is not just you. It's a whole civilization, invisible but real. Fact 37. Penguins don't freeze at minus 40 degrees Celsius because their feathers are a nearly perfect thermos system. The emperor penguin, the most enduring of all, has a feather density reaching 106,000 feathers per square meter, twice that of a sparrow. But the main thing is their arrangement. The feathers overlap like tiles, creating a layer practically impervious to wind. Underneath is another layer of short, soft feathers that trap air against the body. This air is the main insulator. The penguin's body doesn't lose heat to the outside because between the skin and the frosty wind is a layer of air acting like a blanket. Penguins can also reduce blood flow to their extremities, reducing heat loss. Their feet and beak cool to just above 0 degrees Celsius, but don't freeze, because their paws have a heat exchanger system. Arteries and veins run close together, and the blood flowing from the body warms the blood returning. Most surprisingly, when a penguin stands on the ice, it literally saves every watt. Scientists from the University of Sheffield conducted thermal imaging and found that the heat loss of a standing penguin is less than that of a person in a warm jacket. And in a group, even less. When hundreds of penguins huddle together in a tight circle, each receives heat from its neighbors. They slowly rotate to change places and thus survive the Antarctic night. That is, the penguin has not just a fur coat, but a life support system, tested by millions of years of cold. Fact number 38. Your brain predicts what you will see before you even open your eyes. Research begun in the 2000s revolutionized our understanding of perception. It turned out that the brain doesn't simply react to incoming signals, but anticipates them. Neurobiologists from the University of Glasgow and the Leipzig Institute for Cognitive Sciences conducted a series of experiments using tomography. Subjects were shown images with noise, incomplete shapes, or fragments of letters. The brain completed the missing parts before the eye fully focused on the image. In another experiment, volunteers were shown scenes, for example, a kitchen or a street, for fractions of a second, and brain activity was measured. The results showed a surge in areas corresponding to expected objects, even if those objects were not present. The brain expected a teapot in the kitchen and highlighted that area. This is a predictive model of perception. The brain forms a hypothesis and then tests it. This saves resources, speeds up reaction time, and may explain illusions when the prediction is stronger than the fact. Even with movement, for example, turning the head, the visual cortex is activated in advance, preparing the frame that you haven't yet seen. Therefore, vision is not a camera, but a film studio with a powerful script-writing department. And you live not so much in what is, as in what should be, according to your brain. Fact number 39. The Hawaiian squid, Euprymna scolops, a nocturnal creature, harbors the bacterium Vibrio fischeri in its butt. This bacterium is responsible for the squid's bioluminescence and regulates its light cycle. The squid possesses a special light organ on its belly where the bacterium resides. This bacterium produces light, illuminating the seabed beneath the squid. This light is not used for hunting, but for camouflage. It masks the squid's shadow from predators under moonlight. The bacterium is not merely a passenger, but a vital partner. Without it, the light organ does not develop. The squid larva is born sterile and does not glow. Only after acquiring Vibrio fischeri in seawater, the light sac begin to develop. At night, when the bacterial population reaches a critical density, the bacteria begin to glow, quorum sensing. The squid monitors this process and each morning expels up to 95% of the bacteria from its body. This gut cleansing is a ritual, after which the population is renewed. In the evening, the bacterial population grows again, and the glow resumes. This is a symbiosis in which both organisms have evolved to maintain a daily rhythm, a biological lamp with a microbial bulb, which the squid switches on and off daily. Fact number 40. Time flows faster in an attic than in a basement. This is not a philosophical concept, but a measured fact. Gravity affects the flow of time. According to Einstein's general theory of relativity, the closer an object is to a massive body, for example the Earth, the slower time passes for it. This phenomenon is called gravitational time dilation. In 2010, physicists from the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the USA conducted an experiment with two ultra-precise atomic clocks, located 30 centimeters apart in height. The time difference between them amounted to several billionths of a second per day, but it was stable and predictable. This means that a person living in a penthouse on the 30th floor ages slightly faster than their neighbor on the first floor. The difference is vanishingly small, but real. In global navigation satellite systems, this is already fundamental. Their clocks deviate by tens of microseconds, and without accounting for the gravitational effect, GPS signals would have kilometer errors. It turns out that even within one building, the flow of time is not uniform. One floor higher, and you are a billionth of a second closer to the future. It's not noticeable, but it works. And all modern navigation, from phones to spacecraft, relies on this subtle time warp. Fact 41. The water molecules comprising your body may be older than the sun. This is not a myth, but a calculated reality. In 2014, astronomers from the University of Michigan published a model explaining the origin of water in the solar system. They concluded that a significant portion of the H2O molecules that entered the protoplanetary disk before the formation of Earth originated in interstellar space, long before the birth of our Sun. This means that water on Earth is not a derivative of terrestrial processes, but a cosmic inheritance delivered by asteroids and comets. It has been established that the isotopic composition of water on Earth and in some comets is virtually identical. The ratio of deuterium to hydrogen in the molecules coincides. This is the key. Such a signature points to an origin from a single source, cold molecular clouds that existed billions of years ago. Therefore, the water we use, cook with, and are made of formed in interstellar dust. Some molecules may have traveled across the galaxy before ending up in our ocean. Consequently, we are not simply drinking water. We are drinking remnants of prehistoric clouds that survived stellar explosions and the birth of planets. In every sip, a little bit of cosmos. Fact 42. The cucumber knows where to grow. It doesn't simply reach for the light. It constructs a trajectory depending on support, humidity, neighboring plants, and the angle of incident light. Scientists from Tokyo University in 2022 published a high-resolution video showing cucumber sprouts analyzing their environment in real time. Their tendrils are not merely sensitive, but almost intelligent. Upon touching an object, they can determine its diameter, roughness, and even hardness. If the support is unsuitable, the plant releases it and seeks another. Furthermore, the growth trajectory changes depending on the information the plant receives through phototropism and hydrotropism. The stem reaches for softer, non-burning light and higher humidity. The plant acts like an autonomous navigator, correcting its course. Biologists call this behavior neuronless. Reactions occur through complex cascades of hormones and ions, which effectively model decision-making. If another sprout appears nearby, the cucumber changes direction to avoid interference. Some varieties even distinguish their and foreign roots through chemical signals. It turns out that the plant doesn't just live, it chooses its path. Without eyes, without ears, without a brain, but with algorithms that force a reconsideration of the concept of instinct. The cucumber has more strategy than meets the eye. Fact 43. A spider's web is stronger than steel and functions as a sensor. The silk thread spun by a spider consists of proteins with a unique structure. It combines lightness, flexibility, and tremendous strength. According to research from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, spider silk is 5 times stronger than steel of the same mass and can stretch 20 to 30% without breaking. 1 gram of spider silk can stretch for several kilometers. But it's not only the physical properties that make it special. The web is also a sensory organ. Each section of the thread is connected to the spider's legs, and vibrations are transmitted with such precision that it can determine whether it's wind, a fallen leaf, a rival, or an insect. Moreover, the spider can tune its web. By changing the tension of the threads, it regulates sensitivity. In the 2000s, biophysicists from Oxford conducted an experiment. They placed microscopic sensors on different parts of the web and reproduced vibrations of different frequencies. Spiders distinguished a difference of even 1 hertz. This is the level of fine hearing in mammals. The thread becomes analogous to a musical instrument and an echolocation system at the same time. Scientists are already developing synthetic spider silk as a material of the future for bulletproof vests, surgical threads, and smart sensors. All this is inspired by an 8-legged creature and its woven internet long before the digital age. Fact 44. Some tree species remember droughts for decades. Oaks, pines, and sequoias exhibit the phenomenon of epigenetic memory. When a tree experiences extreme conditions, drought, fire, cold, changes occur in its cells that do not affect the DNA but influence how genes function. This is called methylation. Special chemical markers switch on and switch off sections of the genome. In the 2000s, ecologists from the University of Zurich began analyzing tree rings and noticed a strange pattern. After harsh years, even in favorable periods, the tree continues to behave cautiously, growing slowly, retaining more moisture, and depositing denser wood. These changes persist for decades. Moreover, seedlings grown from such trees inherit some of these traits. That is, memory is not only individual, but also intergenerational. This is a kind of survival strategy. A tree that has survived a catastrophe has learned caution and passed the lesson on. In the context of climate change, this has become a new area of research. How forests adapt to extreme weather conditions not through mutations, but through memory. It turns out that trees not only grow, but also remember. In their trunks are not just age rings, but a chronicle of trials. And even if it seems that the forest is silent, it remembers how the sky burned. Fact 45. Cats purr not only from pleasure, but also for therapeutic reasons. The frequency of purring in domestic cats ranges from 25 to 100 hertz. It is within this vibrational range that physiotherapists observe the greatest regenerative effect on bones, muscles, and tendons. Research conducted by the American Institute of Health has shown that low-frequency vibrations in this range accelerate bone healing, increase tissue density, and even help reduce inflammation. Surprisingly, cats purr not only when comfortable, but also when ill, injured, or stressed. Therefore, purring is not simply an expression of emotion, but a recovery mechanism. Even more interesting is the universality. Wildcats such as cheetahs and pumas also purr, and at the same frequencies. Veterinarians have long noticed that cats recover from fractures faster than other animals of comparable mass. Some zoologists suggest that purring is an evolutionary advantage for solitary predators, allowing them to heal themselves without the help of a pack. There is even a hypothesis that close contact with a cat can have a healing effect on humans. In experiments with people suffering from hypertension and anxiety disorders, regular listening to purring reduced cortisol levels. Purring is not just a sound. It is a bodily tool, and perhaps one of the oldest self-repair methods among mammals. Fact 46. Salvador Dali didn't invent the images of melting clocks. He could see them during microsleep. Microsleep, or microscopic brain shutdowns, are short episodes where parts of the brain fall asleep for fractions of a second, even when a person is awake. This usually happens due to sleep deprivation or intense monotonous concentration. In 2012, neurophysiologists from the Frankfurt Institute for Brain Research scanned people performing monotonous tasks and recorded that individual brain areas fall into delta activity, the same as in sleep, while the person remains conscious. This can last only 100 to 200 milliseconds. But in these moments, consciousness disconnects and the brain generates dreams. This is why, when falling asleep, we may feel that something fell, twitched, or changed. Salvador Dalí, as he himself recounted, used the key method. He fell asleep holding a heavy bunch of keys above a metal tray. When sleep began, his fingers relaxed, the keys fell, and the artist woke up, retaining the frozen image from the dream. It is likely that this is how he saw the flowing forms, distortions of objects, and strange perspectives. Today, such practices are used in creative labs. People learn to catch microsleep as a source of ideas. Therefore, surrealism is not always fiction. Sometimes it's just the right brain pause. Fact number 47. A woodpecker's brain doesn't turn into mush, despite the fact that it pecks with an acceleration 1,000 times higher than gravity. During a strike against a tree, a woodpecker experiences an overload of up to 1,000 g-forces, while a human loses consciousness at only 50. How does it withstand this? In 2011, scientists from Peking University, using high-speed video recording and microtomography, revealed the anatomical secrets of the woodpecker. First, its skull is asymmetrically structured, allowing the impact energy to be dissipated into the bones, not the brain. Second, there is almost no cerebrospinal fluid between the skull and the brain, which in other animals acts as a shock absorber, but in this case could amplify the impact. Third, the woodpecker's tongue wraps around the skull, passing behind the occiput and creating an elastic ring that acts as a safety belt. The brain itself is small, tightly packed, and surrounded by porous bones, further reducing the risk of concussion. In addition, the impacts are short in duration, less than a millisecond, and are directed strictly along the body axis, minimizing shifts. Based on the woodpecker skull structure, engineers have developed concussion protection systems for helmets and car seats. What the bird does millions of times in its life without destroying itself has become an inspiration for biomechanics. In every tuck-tuck, perfect physics that any boxer would envy. Fact 48. A fungus can cover an area of tens of hectares and still be a single organism. In Oregon, USA, in the Blue Mountains forest, grows the fungus Armillaria ostoyae, also known as the dark honey fungus. Its fruiting bodies are the small mushrooms visible on the surface. But underground lies a gigantic mycelium network covering an area of more than 80 hectares. This is the largest known living organism on Earth by area. Its age is estimated to be between 2,500 and 4,000 years. The mycelium grows slowly but steadily, enveloping tree roots and absorbing organic matter from the soil. It can kill trees, processing them into nutrients, and simultaneously create an environment for other plants. Scientists from the U.S. Forest Pathology Laboratory identified it as a single organism through genome analysis. Samples from different parts of the forest proved identical. In essence, the forest where tourists walk is the cap of a giant hidden creature. Moreover, the fungus behaves like a network. If one tree begins to die, signals spread through the mycelium and metabolic activity is redistributed. Some scientists even call the mycelium a forest internet, a system in which information, nutrition, and decisions circulate in a single stream. Therefore, each mushroom underfoot may not be the beginning, but the end, and everything else is hidden in shadow and time. Fact 49. Human skin possesses the ability to tell time, even without eyes or a brain. The human body has central biological clocks located in the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, a group of neurons that regulate circadian rhythms. However, in 2005, scientists from Harvard Medical School discovered that nearly every cell in the body, including skin cells, has its own internal clock mechanism. These are molecular cascades of PR, clock, and B-mal proteins, which are synthesized and degraded according to a daily cycle. In the skin, they control cell division, epidermis renewal, sebum production, and sensitivity to ultraviolet light. For instance, several hours before waking, the skin begins to synthesize protective enzymes more actively, anticipating the appearance of the sun. And at night, it switches to recovery mode, accelerating regeneration. Even if a person is completely isolated from light, these rhythms persist, shifting only slightly. But if skin samples are taken from different body areas, say the forearm and cheek, and grown separately in a laboratory, each will follow its own internal clock. Therefore, the orchestra is an orchestra where each section plays its part, guided by an internal metronome. Even if the conductor falls asleep, the violins will know when morning comes.
Fact number 50. A hexagonal hurricane rages on Saturn. For 40 years, scientists have been puzzling over a strange atmospheric phenomenon at Saturn's North Pole, a giant storm in the shape of a nearly perfect hexagon. It was first captured by the Voyager 1 probe in 1981 and later confirmed by Cassini in the early 2000s. Each side of this hexagon is approximately 4,000 kilometers long. The entire structure rotates synchronously with the planet's atmosphere and maintains its shape for decades. What is the origin of this geometry? On Earth, storms are always round, cyclones and anticyclones. But Saturn has a dense atmosphere, strong jet streams, and very rapid rotation. Laboratory simulations using rotating cylinders and liquid have shown that under certain conditions, a vortex can indeed stabilize into a hexagon. But this hurricane on Saturn is not just a mathematical curiosity. Inside it are vortices with speeds up to 400 kilometers per hour, temperatures lower than in other areas of the planet, and even its own eye, a funnel similar to an earthly typhoon. This is not just a storm. It's a gigantic atmospheric machine working like clockwork, according to laws not yet fully understood. And perhaps somewhere within this hexagon lies the key to understanding how stable structures are born in chaos.
Fact 51. Your skeleton completely renews itself every 10 years, although you don't notice it. Bone tissue seems to us something solid and constant, but in reality, it's one of the most alive materials in the body. Two processes continuously occur within it. Osteoclasts break down old tissue, and osteoblasts build new tissue. This cycle is called remodeling. Over a period of approximately 10 years, all the bone substance in the body is completely replaced, imperceptibly but relentlessly. This process is particularly active in areas of stress, the pelvis, hips, and spine. Moreover, bones can remember their shape. If pressure acts on them for a long time in a certain plane, the structure is rebuilt to withstand it. This is Wolff's Law, discovered in the 19th century and confirmed by new visualization methods in the 21st. Surprisingly, even teeth partially follow these principles. The bone around the root can change shape depending on the bite. Bone tissue reacts not only to physics, but also to biochemistry, the level of hormones, vitamin D, and calcium. In women, for example, after menopause, the rate of destruction can sharply exceed the rate of recovery, hence osteoporosis. But even in this case, the body continues to try to build, strengthen, and balance. It turns out you don't walk around with the same skeleton you were born with. It changes, and you simply walk. Fact 52. A river in the Amazon boils. This is not a myth or a metaphor. In Peru, in the heart of the jungle, flows the Chennai Timpishka River, the temperature of which reaches 91 degrees Celsius. It is not directly related to volcanic activity. There are no active volcanoes in the region. This puzzled scientists for a long time. Only in 2015 did geophysicist Andre Russo publish a study explaining a phenomenon. Hot water comes from geothermal sources. Rainwater penetrates deep underground, heats up, and under pressure comes back out and fills the riverbed. The riverbed itself is lined with clay and mineralized rock, which helps maintain the temperature. The river, up to 25 meters wide and up to 2 meters deep, kills everything that enters it. The water doesn't boil constantly, but in some sections it does reach boiling point. Local residents consider the river sacred, calling it the river that kills without blood. Special flora grows on the banks adapted to extreme humidity and temperature. This section of the jungle is like a living laboratory: constant heat, evaporation, water vapor. Scientists are studying the bacteria that survive there. They may help in the development of heat-resistant enzymes for medicine. The boiling river is not fiction. This is the Amazon, and it knows how to surprise.
Fact 53. Stars can ring, literally. Stellar seismology, a relatively young field of astrophysics, studies the vibrations occurring within stars. Just as earthquakes allow scientists to investigate the Earth's structure, starquakes provide information about the internal structure of stars. Such oscillations were first detected on the Sun. Sound waves emanating from its surface reflect off internal layers, forming standing waves. Special spectrometers have made it possible to hear the frequencies of these waves. They range from millihertz to hertz, equivalent to a very low-frequency sound imperceptible to the human ear but convertible to audio format. The Kepler satellite has recorded similar vibrations in distant stars. Each star sings its own note. Moreover, the structure of these sounds depends on the star's mass, density, age, and chemical composition. Scientists have even compiled a catalog of stellar sounds, containing the musical signatures of different stars. This is not merely a curiosity. The star's timbre allows for precise determination of its diameter, age, and evolutionary stage. It turns out that the universe is not a silent vacuum, but a symphony in which each star plays its vibrating part. If we had giant hearing, we would hear galaxies humming like bells. Fact 54. The cells of your body glow under stress, literally. Studies of photon emission conducted at Kyoto University in Japan have shown that living cells emit a faint bioluminescent glow under certain physiological conditions. This glow is particularly strong during oxidative stress, when the amount of reactive oxygen species in a cell increases sharply. It's like a short internal flash. Using highly sensitive photomultipliers, scientists were able to record these flashes. They occur in the millisecond range and are invisible to the naked eye, but are quite measurable. The level of this glow increases, for example, with strong emotions, inflammation, and physical exhaustion. Moreover, the glow differs in different organs. The brain, liver, and skin emit light differently. These studies are already being used in tests for antioxidant activity. Substances that reduce stress also reduce the intensity of the glow. But there is also a poetic twist. Light literally burns within us, albeit a quiet, invisible one. Every irritation, every pain, every recovery leaves a trace not only in memory, but also in the body's photon signature. And in a sense, a human being is not only biochemistry and electricity, it is also light, its own, weak but real. Fact 55. Some turtles breathe backwards. This amazing evolutionary adaptation, cloacal respiration, is found in freshwater turtles, such as the Australian snapping turtle Rheodotites leucopes. During droughts or when the turtle hibernates underwater, it rarely surfaces for air. Instead, it uses its cloaca, the cavity through which the digestive, urinary, and reproductive tracts pass, as an auxiliary respiratory organ. Its walls contain thin vascular outgrowths capable of absorbing oxygen dissolved in the water. This resembles the function of gills. In this way, the turtle can breathe underwater for weeks, remaining almost motionless. In the 2000s, researchers from the University of Queensland recorded that up to 70% of the turtle's oxygen needs are met through the cloaca during submersion. The mechanism is remarkably efficient. The lower the activity, the higher the efficiency of posterior respiration.
This physiological trick gives the turtle a survival advantage in extreme conditions, where there is no access to air, but there is warm water. Evolution is not shy about solutions if they work, and nature apparently has no prejudices. One can breathe with anything, even something that didn't seem intended for that purpose. Fact number 56. A chameleon's tongue accelerates faster than a racing car. Upon ejection, the chameleon's tongue develops an acceleration of more than 200 body lengths per second, meaning that a 30-centimeter tongue covers this distance in 1/100th of a second. If a human could replicate this feat proportionately, their tongue would reach 1.5 meters in an instant. Inside the chameleon's head hides not just a fleshy whip, but a biomechanical catapult, a muscular tube with an elastic collagen band that accumulates energy upon contraction. As soon as the target is spotted, this energy is instantly released. The tongue literally shoots out, grabs the prey with a sucker, and retracts. Microscopic studies have shown the tip of the tongue is covered with microscopic villi, which provide adhesion even to smooth or slippery surfaces. In a forest environment, this guarantees hunting success on the first attempt because there may not be a second. Moreover, chameleons adapt the force of the shot to the size of the prey. A gentle push for a light fly, a stronger blow for a beetle. That is, it's not just a catapult, but also an adjustable projectile. In a world where millimeters and milliseconds decide everything, the chameleon wins the battle not with teeth, but with its tongue. Precisely, quickly, and beautifully. Entry 57. In Antarctica, there is a blood waterfall, and it has nothing to do with blood. This unique natural phenomenon is located in the Taylor Glacier in the dry valleys. A stream of bright red water flows from the ice wall, staining the snow and ice a bloody hue. When it was first discovered in 1905, it was assumed that the color was due to algae. However, scientists later determined that the cause is iron. The water emerging from the glacier is saturated with iron-containing salts. Beneath the surface lies an ancient subglacial reservoir isolated from the external environment for over 1 million years. It lacks oxygen, light, and almost all life. Only microorganisms adapted to extreme conditions. When the water breaks through to the surface, the iron oxidizes in the air, turning into oxide, rust. This is what colors the stream red. Analysis has shown that the subglacial ecosystem uses sulfates and iron as energy sources, similar to what happens at black smokers on the ocean floor. This is one of the harshest environments with proven microbial life. Furthermore, the blood waterfall has become a model for searching for life on other planets. If survival without light and oxygen is possible under permafrost, then similar conditions may exist on Mars or under the ice of Europa, a moon of Jupiter. The red water in the white desert is not just a spectacle, but a clue from nature itself. Point 58. Dolphins call each other by name. In 2013, a team of marine biologists from the University of St. Andrews conducted a series of observations of bottlenose dolphins, the most intellectually developed species of dolphins, and discovered that each dolphin has a unique whistle, a sound pattern that is not repeated by anyone in the pod. This whistle is formed in childhood and persists throughout life. Importantly, other dolphins use it to address a specific individual. This is not just an echo or mimicry, but a conscious reproduction of a name. In experiments with playing back recorded whistles, dolphins responded only to their own and paid almost no attention to others. Moreover, when separated, dolphins at a distance began to call each other by name more often. This discovery has become one of the most convincing confirmations of the existence of self-awareness in mammals, besides humans. A name is not only a designation, but also an element of the structure of I. Dolphins have it, and in some individuals, situations were even observed where they used someone else's name, presumably to call, warn, or even tease. Marine acoustics is a whole language in which a name is not shouted, it is sung. And in this song, intelligence, communication, and possibly the beginnings of culture.
Fact 59. In Africa, there exists a lake capable of suffocating all living things around it in a single night. This is Lake Nyos in Cameroon, one of the few in the world where a so-called limnological eruption can occur. The lake water appears ordinary at first glance, but beneath its surface lies a gigantic cushion of carbon dioxide accumulating over decades. The gas comes from below, from geothermal sources under the lake, and dissolves in the water under high pressure. As long as the water remains calm, the gas does not escape. But if a landslide, a shift, or even heavy rain occurs, the water mixes, the pressure drops, and the carbon dioxide is instantly released. This happened on the night of August 21, 1986. Without warning, Lake Nyos exploded, not with fire, but with gas. A cloud of carbon dioxide, more than 1 million cubic meters, erupted from it, descending into the valley and displacing oxygen. In a few minutes, more than 1,700 people and about 3,000 head of livestock suffocated. People simply fell asleep and did not wake up. Survivors recounted waking up with a feeling of heaviness and suffocation and saw the air lying as a fog on the ground. Since then, special degassing pipes have been installed on the lake to allow the gas to escape gradually. But similar lakes exist in other places, and it is still impossible to fully predict their behavior. This is a rare but frightening reminder. Water is not always life. Sometimes it's a trap.
Fact number 60. The brain is capable of creating colors that do not exist. This phenomenon is known as invisible colors or impossible colors, colors that are absent from the visible spectrum but can be perceived under specific conditions. One such example is yellow-blue. Normally, the eye's receptors cannot simultaneously send signals about blue and yellow to the brain because their excitation is antagonistic. However, in the 1990s, researchers from Yale University conducted an experiment. Using stabilized images and precise focus, they tricked the vision of the participants, forcing them to see both colors simultaneously. The brain, receiving this impossible combination, created something new. Participants described it as a color outside the palette, deep, elusive, unlike anything known. Some reported being unable to recall it after the experiment ended, as if the brain had deleted this impossible information. This confirms that color perception is not a physical process, but an interpretation. The retina sends a signal, and the brain decides how to process it. Hence, visual illusions such as non-existent green squares or pink dots that disappear upon fixation. Color is not objective reality, but the brain's subjective version of what it sees. Therefore, within us exists a unique palette of colors that no computer can reproduce. Only we ourselves, and only at the moment of perception. Fact 61st. The squid's eyes are structured in a way that is unparalleled in optics. The deep-sea squid of the genus Histiotuthus, also known as the cockeyed squid, has 2 eyes of different sizes and shapes. One is huge, round, and looks upwards. The other is small, tubular, and points sideways and downwards. This is not a defect or a mutation. It is a perfect adaptation. Scientists from Duke University in 2010 found out the large eye captures light reflected from the surface, especially bioluminescence emanating from other organisms. The small one is oriented towards the faint glow in the depths. Different eyes use different optical mechanisms. One is assembled like a telescope, the other like a camera with a wide aperture. This cockeyed view allows the squid to simultaneously hunt below and monitor threats from above. Moreover, each eye is connected to a separate visual center in the brain, processing the signal separately and then combining the picture. This is similar to if a person had one eye that saw in infrared and the other in ultraviolet. This anatomy arose because in the ocean, at a depth of over 800 meters, the conditions are extreme. There is almost no light, and only those who see more survive. It turns out that the squid looks into 2 worlds simultaneously and doesn't blink. Fact 62nd. Gorillas possess a sense of humor, literally. Primatologists from the Leipzig Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology have observed gorilla and chimpanzee infants for many years and recorded behavior analogous to playful joking in humans. Gorillas would bend down, hide, pretend to attack, but at the last moment would veer off course, then emit special short sounds, not typical of fear or aggression. These laughter-like vocalizations differed in rhythm and volume, but always occurred during social contact. Furthermore, when a new infant joined the group, adults might tease it, staging mock conflicts that suddenly turned into play. One instance, a gorilla in a zoo intentionally threw grass at a keeper, hid, then peeked out to assess the reaction. With repetition, this became a daily ritual. This indicates an ability for social play, pattern disruption, and interpretation of another's reaction, key components of a sense of humor. Perhaps laughter is not only a reaction to something funny, but also a way to strengthen social bonds. In humans, it has become a cultural phenomenon, while in primates it remains alive. In a blade of grass, a movement, and a sly glance from behind a bush. Fact 63. Your entire body was once stardust, and some of it remains radioactive. The elements that make up the human body, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, iron, calcium, were all synthesized inside stars. The lighter elements were formed in the cores of stars like our Sun, while the heavier elements were created during supernova explosions. Without these colossal energies, it would have been impossible to create elements like iron or iodine. They require temperatures that only occurred during the catastrophic collapses of giant stars. That is, every atom in your body has gone through the cycle of a star's birth, life, and death. But even more surprising is that some of these atoms are still unstable. The human body contains potassium-40, a radioactive isotope that spontaneously decays, emitting beta particles. Because of this, each of us emits approximately 400 nanowatts of radiation, constantly. This is not dangerous, but it is quite measurable. You are a weak but stable source of radiation. If you spent a night in a sealed room with a detector, it would register tiny flashes. We are walking traces of nuclear fusion, embodied in water, carbon, and electricity. And when we look at the sky, we are not only looking into the past of the universe, we are looking into our own chemical past, from which everything began. Fact 64th. The human ear possesses its own echo, and this is not a metaphor. The human auditory system not only receives sounds, but also emits them. This phenomenon is called otoacoustic emission and was discovered in 1978 by the British physicist David Kemp. He noticed that the ear can emit faint sound waves back into the ear canal. This is due to the micro-movements of the outer hair cells in the inner ear, which vibrate not only in response to sound, but also spontaneously. These vibrations can be recorded using sensitive microphones placed in the ear. They are used, for example, to diagnose hearing in newborns. If the ear responds, it means it is working. But even more interesting is that some of these emissions occur not in response to sound, but without any external signal. The ear sings by itself. Why is not entirely clear. There are theories that this is a result of internal sensitivity regulation, a kind of calibration, or a remnant of an ancient function associated with echolocation. Whatever it may be, you do not simply hear the world. Your ear participates in an endless dialogue. It not only listens, but also sounds. And in this sense, silence is not the absence of sound. It is the background against which your perception sings. Fact 65th. Snowflakes are unique not only in their shape, but also in the sounds they produce when falling. In 2021, researchers from the University of Illinois conducted experiments using highly sensitive microphones in windless, silent conditions, recording the sounds made by snowflakes upon landing. The results showed that the type of snowflake influences its acoustic characteristics. Denser, faceted crystals produce a slightly clearer click, while large, fluffy snowflakes create a soft, barely perceptible rustle. These microsounds combine to form the overall acoustic profile of snowfall. This creates the feeling of winter silence, although in reality it is not silence, but a subtle trail of crystalline sounds. Scientists found that snow acts as a high-frequency absorber. This is why a winter street seems quieter. A layer of fresh snow just 10 centimeters thick can reduce reflected noise by 30 to 40%. When the snow melts, this feature disappears. Wet snow no longer muffles sound as effectively. Therefore, each snowfall is not only a picture, but also a soundtrack, audible only to those who listen closely. And in a blizzard, there is not only a whirlwind and cold, but also a score composed by millions of hexagonal conductors falling from the sky. Fact 66. Lobster blood is blue, and this is not a whim of nature, but a solution to a survival problem. Unlike humans and most vertebrates who use iron-containing hemoglobin to transport oxygen, lobsters, crabs, and other arthropods use a different mechanism. Their respiratory pigment, hemocyanin, contains copper, not iron. In its oxidized state, it gives the blood its characteristic blue hue. Why copper? In cold water with low oxygen content, copper is more efficient at capturing O2 molecules. This is especially important for lobsters, which live on the seabed where oxygen can be scarce. Moreover, hemocyanin is not dissolved in cells, as in humans, but floats freely in hemolymph, a fluid that acts as both blood and lymph. But blue blood is not just a curiosity, it's also a key to medicine. The blood of horseshoe crabs, relatives of lobsters, has a unique property. It coagulates in the presence of toxins. Thanks to this property, horseshoe crab blood is used to test the sterility of vaccines and medical preparations. In fact, all injectable drugs undergo testing thanks to creatures with blue blood. What began as the biochemistry of the seabed has become part of global healthcare. And every time we get a vaccination, it contains a drop of the ancient ocean. Fact 67. Fungi communicate using electrical impulses. In 2022, British scientist Andrew Adamatsky from the University of the West of England connected electrodes to the mycelium of 4 fungal species and recorded activity resembling nerve impulses. The frequency, duration, and structure of these signals were not random. They followed a rhythm, changing with damage, contact with other organisms, and even changes in humidity. Some phrases consisted of repeating patterns up to 50 impulses long and resembled in complexity minimal language constructions. The research showed that fungi are capable of transmitting information over long distances through their underground network, the mycelium, which connects trees, herbs, and soil organisms. This is not speech in the usual sense, but an analog of communication based on data transmission. Conditional danger, food nearby, I am here. Such electrochemical transmission is something between a neural network and a communication cable. It turns out that fungi are not just quiet creatures, but active participants in the ecosystem, with their own way of expressing what is happening. And although their speech cannot be deciphered as a novel or a song, it certainly sounds, just at frequencies we are not yet accustomed to listening to. Fact 68. Your bones react to music. This is not a figure of speech, but the result of biomechanical research. Scientists from the University of Southern California conducted a series of experiments in which they exposed osteoblast cells, bone-building cells, to sound waves of different frequencies. It turned out that at frequencies around 50 Hz, the cells began to divide more actively, and the synthesis of proteins involved in mineralization increased by almost 20%. At the cellular level, sound causes micro-vibrations that change the structure of the cytoskeleton and trigger a cascade of chemical reactions. This is especially noticeable in low-gravity conditions, for example, in orbit, where bone tissue loses density. In space experiments with the European Space Agency, sound stimulation was used to maintain bone metabolism in astronauts. Furthermore, vibration therapy is already being tested in rehabilitation after fractures and in osteoporosis. It turns out that the skeleton is not only support, but also a listener, sensitive to rhythm. And perhaps when you turn on music, your body responds not only with dance. Somewhere deep inside, among osteons and trabeculae, an invisible concert is playing, and the bones echo it with growth.
Fact 69. Scientists have discovered that trees can remember past droughts and adjust their behavior accordingly upon recurrence. A group of ecologists from the University of Freiburg studying beech trees in Central Europe observed that trees which survived an extremely dry summer exhibited altered behavior in subsequent years. These trees shed their leaves earlier, limited shoot growth, and reduced transpiration through stomata, tiny pores on the leaves. This resembles learned behavior. The key lies in epigenetics. Stress induces chemical modifications in plant DNA, which do not alter the genes themselves but affect their activity. Upon subsequent drought, these genes are activated more quickly. Furthermore, some of these modifications are passed on to the next generation through seeds. Therefore, the memory of drought is stored in the plant's molecular architecture, not in a brain. This characteristic is already being utilized in reforestation. Seedlings from survivor trees prove more resilient in a changing climate. Even without a nervous system, the tree's body behaves like an organism capable of drawing conclusions. This means that a forest is not merely green mass, but a living archive of experience, where each crown is a record of past storms.
Fact 70. Bees can count and even understand zero. In 2018, Australian scientists from RMIT University conducted a series of experiments in which they trained bees to distinguish the number of objects in pictures. They were able to choose images with fewer elements and did so consistently, taking into account previous experience. In the final stage of the experiment, they were given a choice between an empty card and a card with one object. Bees consistently chose the empty one, meaning they understood that nothing is less than one. This, according to the researchers, demonstrates the concept of zero, an extremely rare cognitive achievement even among mammals. Before this, the ability to operate with zero was possessed only by humans, dolphins, gray parrots, and monkeys. Moreover, bees generalized the rule less is more to new conditions, which cannot be achieved by simple memorization. This suggests the presence of abstract thinking in a creature with a brain the size of a poppy seed. Biologists believe that bee intelligence is emergent, arising from a simple but dense neural architecture. This means that intelligence does not necessarily require billions of neurons. Sometimes the right structure and a drop of nectar as a reward.
Fact 71st. Sharks can sense electricity from a distance of tens of centimeters. Under their skin, especially around the snout, they have ampullae of Lorenzini, specialized sensory organs filled with a jelly-like substance. These ampullae connect to the external environment through pores and can detect the weakest electric fields. A fish hidden in the sand emits barely perceptible biocurrents that a shark can detect from a distance of up to half a meter. The efficiency is so high that the predator can determine the direction of the current based on the potential difference between the ampullae. In close contact, it can even distinguish the heart rate of its prey. Studies show that the sensitivity threshold is about 5 billionths of a volt per centimeter. This is as if a person heard an ant's footsteps from across the street. In sharks living in darkness or murky water, electroreception is especially well developed, as sight and smell are almost useless there. Moreover, some species use this ability not only for hunting, but also for navigation. Ocean currents create stable electromagnetic fields that can be used for orientation. It turns out that a shark swims not only by the smell of blood, but also by invisible currents that it reads like an invisible map. In this sense, the ocean is not darkness. It is a network of signals passing through the water.
Fact 72. The human brain can recognize a face even in a random blot. This phenomenon is called pareidolia, a tendency to see meaningful images in chaos. A cloud resembling a rabbit, an electrical outlet looking at you, or a stain on the wall in the form of a smiling face, all this is the work of the temporal cortex, specifically the area called the fusiform gyrus. It specializes in processing faces and is activated even when the face is imagined. Studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging have shown, in pareidolia, the brain activates the same areas as when perceiving a real face. Moreover, pareidolic images activate emotional responses. A person may feel that they are being watched even though they know it's just a shadow. This is considered an evolutionary mechanism. It's better to mistake a stain for an enemy 100 times than to miss a real one once. Pareidolia is particularly active in the dark, during fatigue, or anxiety. Artists and designers consciously use it to create living forms and stimulate imagination. It turns out a face is not what we see, but what the brain decides to show us, and sometimes it draws it itself so that we don't feel lonely. Fact number 73. Blind individuals can perceive the world using their tongues. This isn't a metaphor, it's a technology that transforms impulses into meaningful images. We're talking about the BrainPort device developed in the 2000s at the University of Wisconsin. It consists of a miniature video camera attached to glasses and a flat sensory module placed on the tongue. The camera transmits the image to an electrode array, and the tongue receives a series of micro-vibrations and impulses. These signals encode contours, shapes, and movement. The brain, receiving this information, gradually learns to interpret it as visual. Test subjects describe the sensation as feeling a drawing in their mouth, and after several weeks, they could distinguish shapes of objects, recognize doors, letters, and even faces. Functional tomography showed that the brain's visual areas are activated, despite the absence of a visual signal from the eyes. This is the phenomenon of neuroplasticity. The brain reassigns areas, retraining perception. The device is particularly effective for those who lost their sight in adulthood. Their brains already know what it's like to see. But even those born blind eventually learn to sense the world differently, not with their eyes, but with their tongues. This overturns the understanding of senses. Seeing doesn't just mean looking, it means understanding signals, even if they come through taste receptors. Fact 74. In Africa, there are plants that summon ants for help through scent. One of the best-known examples is the acacia species Vachelia drepanolobium, growing in the savannas of Kenya. Its branches are covered with hollow thorns, inhabited by ants of the genus Crematoscator. The acacia secretes a special nectar at the base of its leaves, not for pollination, but as payment for protection. When an animal, for example a giraffe, begins to eat the leaves, the tree within seconds releases volatile organic compounds, a signal for the ants. Hearing the smell of alarm, they pour out of the thorns and aggressively attack the offender. One bite is not scary, but there are hundreds of them, and the animal quickly retreats. Moreover, neighboring trees also catch this smell and activate their protection. This is not just symbiosis, but a complex signaling system. The plant recognizes the threat, sends a signal, calls allies, and spreads a warning. The acacia and ants have such a close relationship that without each other, they live worse. The tree without protection dies from herbivores, and the ants without housing and food. Similar agreements exist in other plants, for example in cotton, which cause wasps to parasitize caterpillars. It turns out that nature has its own security system, with a chemical language, sheriffs, and payment for services. And in this ecosystem drama, everyone knows who is a friend and who is dinner. Fact 75. Life has been found 2,000 meters beneath the Antarctic ice, a life that has not seen sunlight for millions of years. In 2021, a British Antarctic expedition was drilling through the Filch-Nerone ice shelf to install seismometers. When the drill reached the dark subglacial rock, scientists deployed a video probe and observed immobile organisms on the surface of the boulder. They appeared to be sponges and other, as yet unidentified, filter feeders. This discovery shocked the scientific community. It was previously believed that at such depths, far from sunlight and without the input of nutrients, only bacterial life was possible. But these creatures were multicellular. Moreover, they were alive. The main question is, where do they get their energy? Most likely from slowly settling organic particles carried by currents under the ice, perhaps from hundreds of kilometers away. This means that even in the most inaccessible places on the planet, ecosystems independent of photosynthesis are preserved. Such findings inspire astrobiologists. If life is possible under the Antarctic ice sheet, then it may also exist under the ice of Europa, a moon of Jupiter. Devoid of eyes, right, and rapid metabolic processes, yet alive. In absolute darkness, amidst eternal cold, quietly clinging to every atom of energy.
Fact 76. Your fingers remember even when you have forgotten. This explains the phenomenon of motor memory, the body's ability to reproduce complex actions without conscious control. If you once learned to ride a bicycle, play scales, or type blindly, the brain may forget the details, but the hands will not. Studies using magnetic resonance imaging have shown, when learning movements, the motor cortex, cerebellum, and basal ganglia are activated. Over time, with repetition, control shifts to deeper layers, and the action becomes automated. It no longer requires step-by-step thinking. But the main thing is that memory is preserved even after long breaks. A musician who hasn't played an instrument for years can recreate a complex piece in a few minutes. Scientists suggest that motor memory doesn't just record movements, but builds activation schemes that are launched as ready-made templates. Even amnesia sometimes doesn't erase them. There have been cases where patients with loss of biographical memory still retained the ability to sew, swim, or play tennis. Your body is a library, where hands and feet are readers who know where the right page is, even if you've forgotten the title. Fact 77. Your skin is capable of hearing. Not literally, like ears, but it participates more actively in speech recognition than is commonly thought. In the 2000 years, research conducted at the University of British Columbia showed when a person hears a sound simultaneously with tactile vibration, for example, a light breeze on the neck or face, the brain integrates both signals into a single perception. This is especially evident in the perception of voiceless consonants, such as P or T. Such sounds are accompanied by a slight air puff, which we usually do not realize, but which the skin registers. In the experiment, the subjects listened to sounds while a weak stream of air was directed at their necks, synchronized with the reproduction of phonemes. With the presence of an air impulse, the accuracy of recognition increased sharply. It turns out that hearing is not only ears. It is a system of merging sensory channels. When a person reads lips, they rely not only on sight, but also on microscopic air movements, vibrations, and even temperature changes. That is why speech perception at concerts or in a noisy club requires not so much hearing as the body. We hear not only with our ears, we hear with our skin, eyes, balance, and even bones. And every conversation is much more than just sound. Fact 78. In the ocean depths lives a fish whose heart can stop during hunting. This is the swordfish, Xiphias gladius. It accelerates to speeds exceeding 60 kilometers per hour, and during an attack, its body experiences tremendous stress, water pressure, resistance, the need to sharply change direction. Scientists have found that at the peak of acceleration, this fish's heart may slow its rhythm or even stop for fractions of a second to redistribute blood flow and direct maximum oxygen to the muscles. This phenomenon is called hunting bradycardia and is also observed in marine mammals, for example, in dolphins. But in swordfish, it is particularly sharp. Its heart rate can decrease by almost half. Simultaneously, thermal organs located in the head are activated. Yes, this fish has areas that can heat the brain and eyes to maintain reaction and visual acuity in icy water. This heating is the result of a special metabolism processing fats at a very high speed.
As a result, the swordfish becomes an ideal hunter for fractions of a second. Vision is sharpened, muscles are tense, the heart is paused. And when the spear rushes forward, everything works in one rhythm, lightning fast. Fact 79. Ants create living bridges from themselves. Species like Eciton burchili in South America exhibit unique behavior. When encountering an obstacle, a gap or gully for example, worker ants link together, forming a chain for others to cross. This isn't a solitary instinct, it's a dynamic structure. Each ant assesses weight, tension, angle, and decides whether to remain in the bridge or resume movement. Princeton University researchers discovered the bridge isn't static, it breathes. If the ant flow increases, the structure tightens. If it weakens, it disassembles. Furthermore, ants can optimize the bridge's length and position, balancing cost and benefit. When a bridge becomes too long and consumes too many bodies, it spontaneously shortens to conserve workforce. The colony, therefore, displays distributed intelligence. There's no central control. There's a system of individual decisions leading to collective action. In this sense, the anthill isn't just a dwelling. It's an organism where ants are not individuals, but cells. And when they assemble into a bridge, they're not just getting themselves across a chasm, they're saying we are together, the way. 80 facts about space. Space smells like fried meat and metal. Astronauts returning from orbit have repeatedly described a strange smell that is felt immediately after exiting open space and removing their spacesuits. Of course, there is no air in space, which means there shouldn't be any smells. However, particles settled on the outer shell of the spacesuit and equipment react with oxygen inside the module, creating a persistent aroma. Some describe it as the smell of ozone, others as a mixture of hot metal, welding, burnt steak, and smoked ore. Chemists believe this is the result of the interaction of atomic oxygen, ultraviolet radiation, and ionized particles. In a vacuum, they destroy molecules on the surface and volatile compounds are formed upon return. Interestingly, this smell was attempted to be recreated. Omega Ingredients, commissioned by NASA, developed a scent for training future astronauts. It is used in training to reduce stress from illogical perception. That is, space is not only dark, cold, and silent, it also smells, unexpectedly sharply and familiarly. As a reminder, even in an airless void, there are traces of what can be felt by nose. Fact 81st. Some lizard species, including the plumed basilisk, Basiliscus plumifrons, and iguanas, possess a secondary heart located in their tail. This is not a poetic metaphor, but an anatomical fact. During movement, especially vertical climbing or jumping, blood must overcome gravity to ascend the elongated body. In such situations, the primary heart is insufficient. Therefore, nature has equipped certain reptiles with a muscular vascular node at the base of the tail, acting as an auxiliary pump. Tail muscle contractions propel venous blood back towards the heart, facilitating circulation. This is particularly crucial during periods of intense activity when the main heart is working at its limit. In some species, this caudal pump can temporarily compensate for circulatory volume loss after injury, such as tail autonomy. Furthermore, scientists have observed a correlation between the activity of this structure and the speed of tail regeneration after autonomy. The tail literally pumps life back into the body. This is a unique instance where movement and circulation are linked not merely metaphorically. And when a lizard disappears into the bushes, leaving behind a twitching stump, a part of its vital force still pulsates within it. Fact 82. Snakes can sense heat with their eyes. Pythons, boas, and rattlesnakes possess special infrared receptors, so-called pit organs, located in depressions between the eye and nostril. These organs detect the thermal radiation of living creatures, allowing the snake to see in complete darkness. Research conducted at the University of California showed that the thermosensitive channels in these pits are activated by temperature fluctuations of only fractions of a degree. This means a snake can detect, for example, a mouse running a meter away, even if it is completely hidden. Furthermore, the snake's brain combines visual and infrared images into a single combined perception, similar to a thermal imager. This gives the predator a huge advantage in conditions of complete darkness or dense vegetation. In laboratory settings, snakes even successfully attacked heated dummies if they simulated movement. Some researchers call pit organs the reptile's sixth sense, as they form a separate map of the surrounding world, not visual, not olfactory, but thermal. Thus, the snake reads not light, but heat. And if you are hiding, thinking you are invisible, it may already see the outline of your heat.
Fact 83. Octopuses have 3 hearts, and 2 of them shut down during swimming. When an octopus swims, its lateral hearts, which pump blood through the gills, stop, and only the central, systemic heart continues to function. This seems illogical. An organism needs maximum oxygen during movement, but octopuses are different. Their blood contains not iron, but copper, the respiratory pigment hemocyanin, which works more efficiently in cold water but less efficiently during high activity. During intense movement, hemocyanin cannot cope with oxygen transport, and it is more advantageous for the organism to switch off part of the system than to overload it. The octopus is not a runner, but a master of camouflage and sudden bursts of speed. It crawls on the bottom more often than it swims. Therefore, its circulatory system is oriented towards short bursts of activity and long periods of rest. Scientists suggest that this 3-heart model is the result of an ancient adaptation to depth and cold water. Moreover, after the end of swimming, the hearts synchronize again, and recovery is surprisingly fast. It turns out that the octopus is not just a strange mollusk with tentacles, but an organism in which the life support system itself is built on the alternation of on and off cycles. It's as if intelligent automation is working inside it. Fact 84. The brain lacks pain receptors. It doesn't feel its own injuries. This seems paradoxical. The organ responsible for perceiving all sensations is itself insensitive. This is why some neurosurgical operations are performed with the patient conscious, for example, when removing a tumor in sensitive areas. The surgeon opens the skull, exposes the cortex, and the patient talks, moves their fingers, reacts. They don't feel pain. Pain is caused by bones, skin, blood vessels, but not neurons. This discovery led to the development of awake craniotomy, a method where the doctor receives feedback directly during the procedure. However, the brain's insensitivity has a downside. Injuries, tumors, and inflammations can develop asymptomatically until they affect the surrounding sensitive structures. Moreover, a headache itself doesn't originate in brain tissue. Its sources are blood vessels, meninges, and nerves. That is, the brain can think about pain, but doesn't know that it itself hurts. This resembles a conductor's booth without an intercom. He controls the orchestra of sensations, but doesn't hear if the walls are cracking. And when a person says, "I have a headache," it's not the brain complaining. It's everything around it. Fact 85. Saliva accelerates wound healing, not only in humans. Saliva contains a complex of proteins and enzymes, one of which is epidermal growth factor. It stimulates the division of skin cells and accelerates tissue repair. This is why minor wounds in the mouth heal much faster than on the skin. But that's not all. Saliva contains histatin, a protein capable of suppressing the growth of bacteria and fungi. It acts as an antiseptic, blocking infection before the immune system is activated. Experiments on animals have shown that applying saliva to a wound reduces inflammation and accelerates the formation of new blood vessels. In dogs, cats, and primates, including humans, the reflex to lick a wound is evolutionarily ingrained. But in rodents, for example, it is taken to an extreme. Rats can lick their wounds until they completely disappear, while having a minimal propensity for infections. Moreover, in the 2000th years, scientists isolated substances from saliva that can stimulate the growth of nerve cells, neurotrophins. They are not yet used in therapy, but the potential is enormous.
It turns out that when we unconsciously lick a scratch or burn, it's not just a habit. It's an ancient pharmacy built into the body. And the first doctor in our life is our own mouth.
Fact 86. The cells of your body are descendants of bacteria. This statement may seem exaggerated, but it reflects the essence of the origin of mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell. It is believed that about 2 billion years ago, the ancestor of the eukaryotic cell engulfed an aerobic bacterium, but it did not digest it. Instead, it admitted it as a partner. Thus, a symbiosis arose. The bacterium provided energy, and the cell provided protection and nutrition. Over time, the bacterium transformed into a mitochondrion, losing part of its own genome, but retaining the ability to divide and produce ATP, the universal energy molecule. Mitochondria still have their own DNA, circular, like bacteria. They reproduce independently of cell division, are sensitive to antibiotics, and even the structure of their membranes is bacterial. It turns out that in each of your cells lives a descendant of an ancient symbiotic bacterium. Moreover, all the mitochondria in your body are from your mother. The egg cell transmits them, but the sperm cell does not. This allowed scientists to reconstruct the mitochondrial Eve, a hypothetical woman who lived about 150,000 years ago, from whom all modern humans descend through the maternal line. Your energy is the echo of a prehistoric agreement concluded between two cells, and this union has never been betrayed. Fact 87. In the caves of Romania, there exists a separate world with an atmosphere unknown on Earth for hundreds of millions of years. Movile Cave, discovered in 1986 near the Black Sea, has been isolated from the surface for over 5 million years. It is hermetically sealed by limestone and clay. No light, wind, or rain penetrates. The air inside is filled with hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide and contains almost no oxygen. And yet, life thrives in this toxic darkness. Scientists have discovered over 50 species of creatures, many of which are found nowhere else. These include white spiders, blind scorpions, millipedes, and sulfur-eating bacteria. Unlike typical ecosystems based on photosynthesis, everything here is built on chemosynthesis. Bacteria convert the chemical energy of hydrogen sulfide into organic matter, which other organisms consume. This is one of the few corners of the planet where life is independent of the sun. Biologists call Movile a temporal bubble. The conditions inside the cave resemble prehistoric Earth during the Devonian period. Studying its inhabitants provides a key to understanding not only the planet's past, but also potential life on other worlds, for example, in the subglacial oceans of Europa or Enceladus. Movile is not just an exotic location. It is an example of how life finds a way, even when all doors are closed. Fact 88. Every breath is half someone else's. The air you breathe contains atoms that were once in the lungs of other people, animals, volcanoes, and even dinosaurs. 1 cubic meter of air contains approximately 25 sextillion molecules. Because the atmosphere mixes, within a few years of exhaling, your nitrogen and oxygen molecules are dispersed across the planet. Scientists have calculated that the probability of you currently inhaling at least one molecule from Caesar's last breath is almost 100%. The same applies to any other creature that has lived on Earth. Nitrogen, the basis of air, is extremely stable. It does not decompose, settle, or react under normal conditions. Therefore, it circulates for centuries. Every breath is part of humanity's breath, part of a thunderstorm, part of an ocean wind. Literally, we breathe history. When you inhale, you take in more than just oxygen. You take in the collective memory of the biosphere. Air is not just a gas, it's an archive, and you read it 16 times a minute. Fact 89. Spiders can fly without wings or even a jump. This phenomenon is called ballooning. A spider raises its abdomen, releases extremely fine silk threads, and air currents carry it tens and sometimes hundreds of kilometers. Flights at altitudes exceeding 4 kilometers have been documented, almost like an airplane. Scientists long believed this was simply drifting on the wind.
However, research conducted at the University of Mainz showed spiders sense not only the wind but also the Earth's electric field. Before flight, they climb onto a ledge, test the air with their front legs, and assess the electrostatic environment. The silk becomes charged, repelling from the similarly charged Earth's surface, creating lift. This explains why spiders can take off even in a complete calm. For spiderlings, ballooning is a dispersal method. For adults, it's a survival strategy. They use it to leave depleted territories, avoid danger, or cross water barriers. These tiny navigators use physics at a level that physicists have only recently understood. Without motors, without gliders, only the force of the field, the length of the thread, and the precise moment of launch. Their parachute is an understanding of the wind, and every flight is a leap of faith on molecular strings. Fact 90. Human skin emits light. This is invisible to the naked eye, but scientists from the Tokyo Institute of Technology, using highly sensitive cameras, have recorded a faint glow from the entire body, bioluminescence, caused by metabolism. The intensity of the glow varies throughout the day. The peak is around 4 in the afternoon. The minimum is around 4 in the morning. This phenomenon is associated with oxidative processes in cells. Free radicals interact with lipids and proteins, causing the emission of photons. This is not thermal radiation, but photons of the visible spectrum, but their number is too small for the human eye to perceive. Interestingly, the face glows brighter than the chest or abdomen, and the left side is slightly brighter than the right. The reasons for this are still unknown. Scientists suggest that this glow may reflect the overall state of metabolism, and in the future, it could be used as a painless diagnostic method. Unlike fluorescence, which requires an external light source, bioluminescence is light emanating from within. So, even when the body seems calm, it whispers photons. Every second, you are glowing, literally, although this glow is currently only visible with a very sensitive camera in complete darkness. Fact 91. Some animals can reproduce without the involvement of another animal's DNA. This is called parthenogenesis, virgin birth. In this process, an egg develops into a complete organism without fertilization. For most species, this is an exception, but for some, it's the norm. For example, stick insects, Phasmatodea, some species of lizards, and sharks. In 2006, a female hammerhead shark at a Nebraska zoo gave birth to a pup, having never contacted a male. DNA analysis confirmed the offspring inherited the genome only from the mother. In reptiles, parthenogenesis is often activated in isolation. In the lizard Aspidoscelis neomexicana, all individuals are female, and the species reproduces exclusively without males. The mechanism is elegant. After chromosome duplication in the egg cell, a complete diploid set is formed, and the zygote begins to divide. However, parthenogenesis has a limitation: low genetic diversity. This makes the offspring vulnerable to diseases and environmental changes. But as an emergency measure, it saves the population. Biologists believe that parthenogenesis is an ancient strategy, preserved in species whose environment is unstable or isolated. This is nature's answer to loneliness. If you can't find a mate, continue yourself. And although it sounds like science fiction, such births do happen for real, without witnesses, only with the will to live. Fact 92. The human body contains an organ discovered only in the 21st century, and it weighs more than the skin. This is interstitial tissue, or intercellular space, a system of the finest channels filled with fluid permeating the entire body. For a long time, it went unnoticed. During standard sample preparation for microscopy, the fluid evaporated and the tissue flattened, losing its structure. Only in 2018 did scientists from New York University, using an endoscope with laser microscopy, see. Under the surface of the skin, in the walls of blood vessels, around organs, there is an extensive network of dynamic channels connected into a single whole. These are not just gaps, but an active system of exchange, cushioning, and probably communication. Interstitial fluid acts as a buffer against impacts, regulates pressure, and participates in signal transmission. Moreover, there is a hypothesis that it is through these channels that cancer cells spread, like through underground passages. Some researchers call interstitial tissue a new organ, the largest by mass. It's as if there were always a river inside us whose existence no one suspected. And it flows, quietly, with every movement. Fact number 93. Fossils can record lightning strikes. This is evident in fulgurites, glass tubes formed when lightning strikes sand. The temperature at the point of impact reaches 30,000 degrees Celsius, hotter than the sun's surface. The sand melts instantly, and the molten material, solidifying, forms elegant hollow formations resembling roots or vessels. These structures can extend several meters deep, preserving the direction of the discharge. Each fulgurite is unique, like a fingerprint of the strike. Scientists study them to understand lightning distribution in prehistoric times. In some cases, fulgurites are found in layers millions of years old, preserving traces of the ancient atmosphere and isotopes subjected to brief thermal impact. This is literally a time capsule. Furthermore, in the 2000 years, it was shown that when lightning strikes phosphorus-rich soils, phosphides can form, compounds that presumably played a role in the origin of life. That is, lightning itself is not only a destroyer, but also a chemical architect. It writes with light, melts a moment, turning it into stone. And if you look at a fulgurite, you see the frozen anger of the sky, or its brief kiss with the earth. Fact 94. Animals are capable of laughter. This has been experimentally established, first in primates, then in rodents, dogs, and even birds. In chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas, laughter manifests as interrupted breathing during tickling, play, or joyful excitement. Rats emit ultrasonic signals, a series of rapid signals at a frequency of about 50 kilohertz when playing, running, or responding to affection. Scientists from Humboldt University trained rats to associate tickling with positive emotions, and the rats began to laugh in anticipation as a hand approached. In dogs, according to observations by animal behaviorists, laughter is expressed in a special breathing rhythm, interrupted but not aggressive, differing from normal panting. Birds, especially parrots, can not only imitate human laughter, but also use it in the context of play. Laughter is a social glue, a way to signal, "I am not dangerous, I am having fun, let's continue." Its emergence predates speech and complex behavior. It is an ancient emotion that nature has built into communication mechanisms. And when you hear laughter, even from a rat friend, you hear more than just a sound. You hear a confession. I am alive. I feel. I am with you. Fact 95. The water molecules in your glass may be older than the sun. This is not an exaggeration, but a calculation made by astrochemists studying the origin of substances in interstellar clouds. Water forms in space long before stars are formed, when hydrogen and oxygen atoms settling on dust particles in cold nebula react and form ice. These molecules survived the collapse of the protosolar cloud and became part of the substance from which the Earth was formed. Analysis of the isotopic composition of comets and meteorites has shown that a significant part of the water on our planet is extraterrestrial in origin. This is primordial water, which came with bodies formed before the birth of the sun more than 4.5 billion years ago. It turns out that when you drink water, you are in contact with a substance that has traveled through space, witnessed the birth of stars, and ultimately became part of your cells. These molecules could have fallen onto the proto-Earth as part of icy asteroids, been preserved in the depths of the Earth's interior, circulated in clouds, rivers, and organisms. Their journey is not a cycle, but a saga spanning billions of years. And what seems to you a life-giving gulp when your throat is dry is, in fact, an echo of galactic history. Fact 96. The human tongue can distinguish the taste of water, contrary to the long-held belief that it is tasteless. In the 2000s, neurobiologists discovered a specific reaction to pure water in the tongue's sensitive receptors.
Experiments on mice conducted at the California Institute of Technology showed that the introduction of water activates cells different from those responsible for salty, sour, sweet, or bitter tastes. These cells respond to changes in the ionic composition of saliva. When water dilutes it, the receptors register a shift. Areas responsible for sour taste are particularly sensitive to water. This may be an evolutionary mechanism. In nature, plain water is a rarity, and the ability to recognize it among many liquids containing salts, acids, or toxins provides an advantage. Some animals, for example cats, have been found to have specialized taste channels targeted at water molecules. Moreover, thirst enhances receptor sensitivity. In a dehydrated organism, the taste of water becomes more pronounced. This is not a hallucination, but part of a built-in feedback loop. It turns out that the taste of water is not the absence of taste. It is a subtle signal that the body knows how to hear. If you listen to it, you can feel. Water is not emptiness, it speaks.
Fact 97. Some trees can communicate through an underground internet. This is not a metaphor, but a real ecosystem that scientists have named the Wood Wide Web. Its basis is mycorrhiza, a symbiosis between tree roots and fungi. The mycelium, permeating the soil, connects dozens and sometimes hundreds of plants, forming an underground network for the exchange of substances, signals, and even, conditionally, information. Through these channels, one tree can transfer nutrients to another. For example, an old tree feeds a young shaded one. Or, conversely, an infected tree warns its neighbors with chemical signals, and they activate their defense genes. Experiments by Suzanne Simard in Canada have shown that birches and spruces exchange carbon depending on the time of year, helping each other survive a lack of light. The central trees of the network, called mother trees, nourish not only their offspring but also other seedlings. Therefore, a forest is not just a collection of trees. It is a community capable of adaptive mutual aid. And when you stand in a forest, it seems that everything is motionless. But underground, millions of connections pulsate harmoniously, like a heart. Fact 98. The human brain is capable of learning during sleep. This doesn't mean you can learn a foreign language by simply placing a playlist under your pillow. However, neuroscientists have proven that under the right conditions, the brain can memorize new information during slow-wave sleep. In an experiment using smells and sounds in conjunction with images, subjects were shown pictures accompanied by specific scents or tones. During sleep, these smells or sounds were repeated. Upon waking, the subjects demonstrated improved recall of the associated images. Another experiment showed that playing rhythms corresponding to the location of objects on a screen improved performance on spatial orientation tasks after sleep. This is linked to the process of memory consolidation. During sleep, the brain rewrites short-term memories into long-term ones, primarily in the hippocampus. Signals received at this time can influence which memories are retained. Of course, sleep learning requires precise tuning. A sound that is too loud will awaken the subject, while a sound that is too faint will not be registered. Nevertheless, the principle has been confirmed. Therefore, sleep is not a complete shutdown of consciousness, but a complex background process. And with the right input, it can learn even without waking. Fact 99. Some turtles breathe through their cloaca. More precisely, through the cloaca, a versatile opening that serves excretory, reproductive, and ventilatory functions in reptiles. This unusual breathing method has been found in freshwater turtles, such as the Australian snapping turtle, Emidora, and the North American softshell turtle, Apollon. These species possess specialized sacs with capillaries in their cloaca, cloacosacs, through which gas exchange with the surrounding water takes place. This allows the animals to remain underwater significantly longer than usual. In cold water, where metabolism is reduced, this breathing method allows them to stay submerged without surfacing for air for several hours, and sometimes to survive the entire winter in a state of animation under the ice. The mechanism of this system is remarkably efficient. The cloacal sacs have a large surface area, thin walls, and water movement through them is stimulated by the movement of the hind muscles. In practice, this means that the turtle can ventilate itself through its rear without using its lungs. For biologists, this is an example of extreme adaptation, using an existing opening for a new purpose without radically restructuring the organism. And in a world where air is scarce, even the rear can become a doorway to life.
Fact number 101. At the level of elementary particles, the concepts of past and future lose their clear meaning. In quantum physics, there is a phenomenon called quantum entanglement. If two particles have interacted, their states become interconnected, and a change in one instantly affects the other, regardless of the distance between them. However, the principle of weak measurement and quantum retrocausality is even more unusual. In experiments similar to John Wheeler's delayed choice, a measurement made after a particle has passed through a system affects the particle's behavior in the past. For example, a photon passing through an interferometer behaves as a wave or a particle depending on which detector is activated, even if the detector is activated after the photon has passed. This challenges the linear perception of time. Some interpretations, including the two-directional model of Yakir Acharonov and Lev Weidman, suggest that the future can influence the past, just as the past influences the future. At the macroscopic level, everything is subject to thermodynamics, but at the quantum level, causality is not a rule, but an option. Therefore, time is not a straight line, but rather a network of interdependencies. And in this sense, when you look at stars whose light has traveled for millions of years, you are not simply observing the past. It may be observing you in return.